Hi folks, welcome to the fun and excitement that is the 1973 Shasta camper trailer restoration project. Today I'm going to focus on refinishing the exterior panels. The cold wet weather is upon us, so the pressure is on to finish up the outside of the coach. The exterior skin of the trailer consists of these aluminum siding panels. Structurally, the pieces I have range in condition from good to fair. This piece, for instance, has a pretty good sized crack right here at the bottom of the door and numerous dents and gouges from years of use and abuse. But because of the exorbitant cost of new siding, I'm going to try to fix and reuse whatever I can. My plan of attack for bringing this siding back to life is as follows. I'm first going to apply a coat of paint stripper to remove all of the old paint that I can. I'm doing this because these pieces don't just have the original coat of factory paint, but also subsequent coats of spray paint, and in this piece's case, white latex house paint, all of which should be removed if I want the best chances of a decent paint job. We're working on removing the paint from this piece of siding. This is a top piece, so it will be one of the first to be installed. After a couple coats of stripper, the panels look something like this. Most of the paint has been removed, but not all of it. As you can see here, there's still some remnants of the factory paint. So at this point, I'll wet sand the whole panel with 320 grit wet dry sandpaper to smooth out any rough edges and prepare for priming. Just sanding out the scratches. And here's how the panels look after wet sanding. The idea behind the wet sanding is to scuff up the surface to allow for better adhesion of the new paint and to also feather out the rough edges between the old paint and the aluminum. That way those sharp ridges don't show through in the final finish. This piece of siding is almost ready for primer, but before I spray it, I want to clean off any sanding residue with a little bit of acetone. Okay, this piece is clean and ready to go. I'm going to prime it with this Rust-oleum self-etching primer. It's made special for bare aluminum.
So I had a little dilemma when I was putting this video together. I think it's important to have footage of the actual painting, but watching somebody paint sure is boring. So I decided to keep things interesting with a little background music. I dusted off the old microphone and piano for these next few numbers. I hope you like it, and just as a courtesy reminder, you can mute the audio at any time by clicking this little speaker icon on the lower ribbon. To step outside and start priming this siding, to get painting done before wet weather comes and washes away the hard work that I've done.
Okay, not bad. That's ready for paint.
Next, I'll lay down some primer on this panel, which had a significant amount of bumps and bruises, the worst of which is the very large dent you see here. This is the front panel on the trailer, so I postulate that this dent very likely happened when somebody jackknifed the trailer and this came in contact with the tow vehicle. I tried my best to straighten it out with the gentle finesse of some wooden blocks and a framing hammer, and the end result is far from straight, but measurably better than what I started with. The piece has gone from crinkled to wavy. Potato chips?
And here we go.
I'm getting into the rhythm now. Shake, rattle, rattle, and spray the color down. Sweep back and forth while I keep constant force with my thumb on the button until it gets sore. Toxic fumes make me fall on the floor. And the neighbors don't care much for me anymore, cause my house used to be nice with trimmed grass and roses, but lately it looks like an RV exploded. Boom! Refrigerator in the driveway. Ooze! Got a landscape covered in clutter.
There. You're gray now, sucker. Now we're going to go to town on this rear portion. I'll start by pulling off these running lights. Next, I'll put this piece of plastic under here to catch any corrosive paint stripper sludge. My wife is now applying a nice thick coat of the paint remover. Have I ever told you you're a good stripper? We've let the stripper sit for a while, and now the old paint is coming off in sheets. The wet sanding is complete. Now I'll just give this panel a quick wipe down to clean it off before priming. Old socks and underwear makes a great paint rag. Now for a coat of primer. It seems like the wind picks up whenever I want to paint. But that helps it atomize better, right?
We stripped the old pieces and sanded the aluminum, touched up the rough stuff, sure hope I didn't ruin them. The metal's wearing thin in places like my patience is with this junk heap. If I could retrace my paces, I should have walked away on the basis of all the time wasted. But I love my Shasta. You can tell by how happy my face is.
Okay, the primer coat is applied and I think it looks pretty good except for one little sag right here, but that's no biggie. I'll just wet sand that a little bit later. The primer is dry. Now I'm just giving this back panel a quick wet sand before painting. Okay, I've got a few pieces of siding primed and ready, and it's time to do a little bit of painting. Now I don't like painting. I'm not any good at it, and I've only used a paint sprayer 4 or 5 times in my life. It seems like whenever I try to paint, I get really nervous because of all the different variables. There's the air pressure, there's all those little adjustments on the gun, there's the amount of reduction that the paint requires. It's all just so overwhelming, not to mention messy and stinky. But I'm going to give it my best shot today. After all, I want my trailer to be one color, and hopefully I will be successful and triumph in the face of adversity. So my weapons of choice for getting some color back on the Caravan are white, high gloss, Rust-oleum, oil-based enamel. See what I mean about how messy this stuff is? All I did was look at the can yesterday, and this is what happened. I'm using this paint for a couple of reasons. It's cheap, and it's also not quite as poisonous as standard automobile paint. You see, some years ago, I painted a car in a garage with PPG 2-part paint using nothing more than a garden hose for a respirator. And I really feel that that episode took a few years off my life, and ever since I've been trying to live with a little bit greater respect for my health. The sprayer I'm using is a Husky HVAC paint sprayer. Oh, pardon me, hvlp. It's not a furnace. This is just a standard Home Depot special, and I realize that neither the tools or the paint are of the greatest quality, but this is a trailer. It's not Pebble Beach Concord. I'm thinning my paint down about 15% with this acetone. I just used some rough calculations using a tape measure on the paint can here. Fill it up just about to the tippy top. Acetone isn't good for these gloves. So let's see if I can get more paint in this canister than ends up on the ground. Oh! Ah. That's a bad start to the day. Oh well, that's how we roll. Okay, I've got a piece of siding laid out here on my table. The wind is blowing. I'm inexperienced. I already made a big mess. Everything's coming up Broadway.
And here's a brand new tune by Jenny's Garage, perfect for any occasion, whether you're pulling a door that says poosh, receiving bad news about a loved one's health condition, or just falling down some stairs.
Hey, that wasn't so bad. Let's try this other piece. All right, now I'll whisk it away into the garage. paint this guy. Wish me luck. The proper coat is on, and we've been waiting for so long, but now the time has come. I'm nervous, but it's gonna be fun. A year since we've begun, and it's so far from done. So let's spray paint this gray away, and we can make the Shasta shine like the sun. Okay, here's how the pieces look after a coat of paint. Overall, I'm happy with the results. There were a few trouble spots, however, like right over here. I was a little bit light with the paint, but no worries. I plan on laying down at least one more coat before it's all said and done. The worst problem I had was with this piece, which I have laying out here at the painting station. Before I painted it, I wiped down the entire panel with alcohol, and I think I started painting before that alcohol was completely evaporated. This caused all of these little dots to appear throughout the siding. I think in painter terminology they're called fish eyes. What I plan to do to remedy this is wet sand all of the little dots with 600 grit wet sandpaper, and then spray a coat of primer and follow that with a couple more coats of white. Running into trouble. I let this dry for over 24 hours, yet the paint is still gooey. It peels right off. I don't know if that's because of that alcohol I was talking about, or it just needs more time to dry, but I think I'm just going to use the paint stripper and take all of this off and start over again. I told you I don't like painting. Looking better all the time. Okay, I've got most of the pieces of siding painted and ready to be installed. We stripped off all of the old paint, then we sanded down the aluminum panels, put down a coat of self-etching primer, and then followed that with 3 coats of gloss white Rust-oleum. I'm really happy with the results, however it's not a professional job. I should have wet sanded between every coat of primer and paint to smooth out any imperfections. I didn't do that because this is already a time-consuming project, and I don't want to be working on the Shasta when they inaugurate the 50th president. And after all, it's just a trailer. So in the spirit of full disclosure, let me give you some close-up views of some of these panels. I could just leave the camera here and say, see, it looks perfect. Another super job well done by Jenny's Garage. But I'm not going to do that. This is the real world, and as long as it looks better than a brush and roller job, I'm happy. And here's a close-up view of one of the panels. As I said, definitely not perfect, but I'm happy with it, and I don't want to paint it anymore. Did I mention I hate painting? You can see there are some little dust particles and debris embedded in the paint. This is because I painted them outside, and even though I tried to get them inside the garage as quickly as I could, some particles and contaminants inevitably settle on the panels. Now, if I had sanded between coats, this would have ended up a lot smoother, because every time I painted, the dust that would have been trapped with that coat of paint would have been subsequently smoothed down by the sandpaper. Instead, I now have an accumulation of 3 coats worth of dust. But that's okay. That's the price I paid for getting it done in a more speedy manner. I also noticed that bugs like to land in the wet paint. Like right here, for instance, a little fly tried to park himself, just like that. And instead of leaving well enough alone, I just couldn't help myself. I tried to pluck the little bugger off while the paint was still wet, and I made a bigger mess than would have been left if I would have just waited for the paint to dry, at which time I could have amputated post-mortem. But that's okay, I'll just call that the Jenny's Garage stamp of approval. What say we get out of this fly nest and start installing some siding? And we'll move on to that phase of the project in the next episode. But before we part ways today, I'd like to offer a few pointers that I've picked up about painting. First, good preparation of the item you want to paint is really important. The goal is to make the piece smooth and clean. And even if it looks smooth before the primer is applied, oftentimes you'll be able to see little dents and ridges after it's primed, because at that time everything will be of the same color and texture. And if you notice imperfections at that point, you can definitely count on those flaws being even more obvious once the color coat is applied. That glossy finish broadcasts everything that's underneath. So depending on how meticulous you are, that's something to keep in mind. Also, as you're painting, hold the gun perpendicular to your work at a constant distance and speed. If I was painting this door with my fingertips, for instance, I would want to paint like this. Not like this. Furthermore, never apply paint unless the gun is in motion. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to paint my face on this screen right here. I'd start with the gun up away from my face, then start moving, then pull the trigger, then paint my face, then release the trigger, and then stop moving. I would not want to start in front of my face, then apply paint, then move, then stop, then release the trigger. That would make heavy spots on each side of my face and not produce a uniform coat. Lastly, I think it's a good idea to adjust the spray pattern of the gun and the rate of paint deposition on a scrap piece before painting. What I tried to do was set up the sprayer so that if I held it 10 inches from the work and pulled the trigger for about a second, it would create a profile of paint that looked like this, that had good coverage but didn't start to build up or drip. I'm sure happy I got those pieces painted. Hallelujah. Thanks for watching.